Ambrose Burnside was a Rhode Island gentleman and a complex military figure who became one of the most controversial commanders of the Civil War. Ambrose Everett Burnside, Union general and later politician, was born in Liberty, Indiana on May 23, 1824. He came from a modest family. He had a distinctive appearance with his famous facial hair. Burnside's early years were marked by ambition and determination. He attended the United States Military Academy at West Point, graduating in 1847, ranking 18th in a class of 38 cadets. His education there shaped his understanding of military tactics and leadership, though his later career would test those lessons in the most brutal ways imaginable. After graduating from West Point, Burnside was assigned to the artillery and sent to Mexico, though he arrived too late to see significant action in the Mexican-American War. He was stationed at Fort Adams in Newport, Rhode Island, and later served in the Southwest during the Apache Wars. It was during this time that Burnside began developing his ideas about military equipment and weaponry. In 1853, Burnside resigned from the army to pursue a business venture. He had invented a breech-loading rifle, the Burnside carbine, which he believed would revolutionize warfare. He established the Bristol Firearms Company in Rhode Island to manufacture his invention. The rifle was innovative for its time, featuring a unique cartridge design that allowed for faster reloading than traditional muzzle-loading weapons. Burnside's business venture initially showed promise. His carbine attracted attention from military officials and sportsmen alike. However, despite the technical merits of his design, the business side of the enterprise proved challenging. Burnside was a better inventor than businessman. He struggled with production costs, marketing, and competition from other firearms manufacturers. By 1857, his company had failed, leaving him deeply in debt. The failure was devastating both financially and personally. Burnside had invested everything into this venture, and its collapse left him nearly bankrupt. He was forced to sell his patents and personal property to satisfy creditors. This period of his life taught him humility and resilience, qualities that would serve him throughout his later military career. After his business failure, Burnside moved to Illinois, where he found work with the Illinois Central Railroad. He became the treasurer of the railroad company, a position that provided stability and allowed him to rebuild his life. During this time, he also became involved with the Illinois militia, serving as a major general. His military bearing and West Point training made him a natural leader in the volunteer forces. When the Civil War erupted in April 1861, Burnside was quick to answer the call. He helped organize the 1st Rhode Island Infantry, one of the first volunteer regiments to respond to President Lincoln's call for troops. Burnside was appointed colonel of the regiment and led them to Washington. His unit was among the first to arrive in the capital to defend it against potential Confederate attack. Burnside's regiment participated in the First Battle of Bull Run in July 1861. The battle was a disaster for the Union forces, but Burnside's performance was considered adequate given the chaos of the engagement. Following Bull Run, he was promoted to brigadier general. The promotion reflected both his West Point credentials and his political connections in Rhode Island and Illinois. In the fall of 1861, Burnside was given command of an expeditionary force tasked with operations along the North Carolina coast. This assignment would prove to be the high point of his military career. Burnside's Burnside Expedition, as it came to be known, was remarkably successful. In February 1862, his forces captured Roanoke Island, defeating the Confederate garrison there. This victory gave the Union control of Albemarle Sound and threatened Confederate positions throughout eastern North Carolina. Following the success at Roanoke Island, Burnside's forces captured New Bern in March 1862 and Fort Macon in April. These victories secured Union control of the North Carolina coast and provided bases for future operations. The campaign was one of the few bright spots for the Union in the early months of 1862. Burnside's success earned him promotion to Major General and national recognition. Newspapers praised him as one of the Union's most capable commanders. His distinctive appearance, particularly his unusual facial hair, made him instantly recognizable. The style of whiskers he wore, connecting his sideburns to his mustache while leaving his chin clean-shaven, would eventually be named after him, though with the syllables reversed, sideburns. In July 1862, Burnside was called north to take command of the 9th Corps in the Army of the Potomac. He participated in the Second Battle of Bull Run in August, though his corps saw limited action. When General John Pope's army was defeated, Burnside's corps helped cover the retreat back to Washington. The following month, Burnside played a crucial role in the Battle of Antietam. His corps was tasked with attacking the Confederate right flank by crossing a stone bridge over Antietam Creek. The bridge, which would later bear his name, became the site of intense fighting. Burnside's troops struggled for hours to cross the bridge against determined Confederate resistance. When they finally succeeded in crossing, their advance came too late in the day to exploit the breakthrough. The delay at what became known as Burnside's Bridge has been the subject of debate among historians ever since. After Antietam, General George McClellan, commander of the Army of the Potomac, was removed from command due to his failure to pursue the retreating Confederate army. President Lincoln needed a replacement, and he offered the position to Burnside. Burnside twice declined the command, recognizing his own limitations. He did not believe himself qualified to command such a large army. He understood that armor-level command required skills and judgment he was not certain he possessed. However, Lincoln insisted, and Burnside felt he could not refuse a direct order from the president. In November 1862, Ambrose Burnside reluctantly accepted command of the Army of the Potomac. It was a decision that would define his legacy and haunt him for the rest of his life. Burnside immediately reorganized the army, creating 3 grand divisions to streamline command and control. He then developed a plan to move quickly toward Richmond, the Confederate capital, before winter weather made campaigning impossible. His strategy called for crossing the Rappahannock River at Fredericksburg, Virginia, then advancing on Richmond before General Robert E. Lee's Army of Northern Virginia could react. The plan had merit if executed quickly, but delays in the arrival of pontoon bridges gave Lee time to concentrate his forces at Fredericksburg. By the time Burnside was ready to cross the river in early December, Lee's army was entrenched on the heights overlooking the town. Despite the obvious strength of the Confederate position, Burnside decided to proceed with his attack. On December 11, 1862, Union engineers began laying pontoon bridges across the Rappahannock under fire from Confederate sharpshooters in Fredericksburg. After clearing the town, Burnside spent 2 days positioning his forces, giving Lee even more time to strengthen his defenses. On December 13, Burnside ordered a series of frontal assaults against the Confederate positions. The main attack was directed against Mary's Heights, where Confederate infantry stood deep behind a stone wall at the base of the hill, with artillery positioned on the heights above. The position was nearly impregnable. Wave after wave of Union soldiers advanced across open ground toward the stone wall. Confederate fire cut them down by the hundreds. Brigade after brigade was sent forward, each attack ending in slaughter. The carnage was appalling. Union soldiers fell in heaps before the stone wall, unable to reach the Confederate line. By the end of the day, the Union had suffered over 12,000 casualties. The Confederates lost fewer than 5,000 men. It was one of the most one-sided battles of the entire war. Burnside was devastated by the disaster. He reportedly wept as he watched his men being slaughtered. He even proposed to personally lead his old 9th Corps in another assault the next day, but his subordinates talked him out of it. The Battle of Fredericksburg was an unmitigated disaster for the Union cause and for Burnside personally. In the aftermath of Fredericksburg, Burnside's army remained encamped across the river from the Confederate positions. Morale was shattered. The soldiers had lost confidence in their commander. Burnside's officers began to openly criticize him and plot against him. In January 1863, Burnside attempted to restore his reputation with a new offensive. He planned to cross the Rappahannock upstream from Fredericksburg and flank Lee's position. The movement began on January 20th, but almost immediately the weather turned against them. Heavy rains turned the roads into rivers of mud. Wagons, artillery, and even pontoon boats became hopelessly mired. Soldiers struggled through knee-deep mud, unable to make progress. The offensive, which became known as the Mud March, was abandoned after 2 days. It was a humiliating end to Burnside's tenure with the Army of the Potomac. Following the Mud March, Burnside attempted to reassert his authority by ordering the dismissal of several subordinate officers who had been disloyal. However, President Lincoln intervened and instead removed Burnside from command of the Army of the Potomac. It was a bitter pill for Burnside to swallow, but he accepted the decision with dignity. He was reassigned to command the Department of the Ohio, a position that removed him from the main theater of the war in the East. In his new command, Burnside was responsible for security in the border states of Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois. This was a politically sensitive position, as these states contained significant numbers of Confederate sympathizers known as Copperheads. Burnside took a hard line against dissent, issuing General Order No. 38, which declared that anyone committing treason or expressing sympathy for the enemy would be subject to military trial and execution. The most controversial action under this order was the arrest of Clement Vallandigham, a former Ohio congressman and prominent Copperhead. Vallandigham had given speeches criticizing the Lincoln administration and the war effort. Burnside had him arrested, tried by military commission, and sentenced to imprisonment for the duration of the war. The case became a national controversy, raising questions about civil liberties and military authority in wartime. Lincoln, embarrassed by the situation, commuted Vallandigham's sentence to banishment to the Confederacy. The incident damaged Burnside's reputation further and highlighted his tendency toward heavy-handed action without considering the broader political implications. In the fall of 1863, Burnside led his troops into East Tennessee as part of a campaign to secure that region for the Union. East Tennessee was strongly Unionist in sentiment, and its liberation had been a priority for Lincoln. Burnside's forces occupied Knoxville in September 1863. However, when the Union Army was defeated at Chickamauga in Georgia, Confederate forces under General James Longstreet were sent to recapture Knoxville. Burnside found himself besieged in the city with limited supplies and no immediate prospect of relief. The siege lasted from November 17 to December 4, 1863. Burnside's forces successfully defended the city against several Confederate assaults, most notably at Fort Sanders, where a Confederate attack was repulsed with heavy losses. When Union forces under General William Sherman approached, Longstreet withdrew, ending the siege. The successful defense of Knoxville was a bright spot in Burnside's otherwise troubled military record. In early 1864, Burnside returned to command of the 9th Corps, now serving under General Ulysses S. Grant in the Overland Campaign against Lee's army in Virginia. The 9th Corps fought in the battles of the Wilderness, Spotsylvania, and Cold Harbor. These were brutal, grinding battles of attrition that characterized Grant's strategy of constant pressure on the Confederate army. Burnside's corps performed adequately in these engagements, though not with particular distinction. The corps suffered heavy casualties, as did all of Grant's forces during this campaign. By June 1864, Grant's army had reached Petersburg, Virginia, and settled into siege operations. The 9th Corps took its place in the Union lines surrounding the city. It was at Petersburg that Burnside became involved in one of the most infamous incidents of the Civil War, the Battle of the Crater. Union soldiers from the 48th Pennsylvania Infantry, many of whom had been coal miners before the war, proposed digging a tunnel under the Confederate fortifications and exploding a massive mine. The plan was approved, and over the course of a month, the miners dug a 500-foot tunnel and packed it with 4 tons of gunpowder. The mine was exploded before dawn on July 30, 1864, creating an enormous crater and killing hundreds of Confederate soldiers. The explosion was the signal for a Union assault that was supposed to exploit the breach in the Confederate lines. However, the assault was badly mismanaged from the start. The division that was supposed to lead the attack had not been properly prepared. Soldiers advanced into the crater itself rather than around it, becoming trapped in the massive hole. Confederate forces recovered from their initial shock and counterattacked, pouring fire into the crater. Union soldiers, including several regiments of United States colored troops, were slaughtered in the crater. The battle became a massacre. By the end of the day, Union forces had suffered over 4,000 casualties while achieving nothing. Burnside was blamed for the disaster, though the fault was shared by several commanders. A court of inquiry found that Burnside had failed to properly supervise the attack. Shortly after the Battle of the Crater, Burnside went on leave and never returned to active command. His military career effectively ended in that blood-soaked crater outside Petersburg. In April 1865, Burnside formally resigned from the army. The war ended just days later with Lee's surrender at Appomattox. Burnside had served his country for 4 years of brutal warfare, experiencing both triumph and tragedy. His military record was mixed at best. He had shown ability as a corps commander and in independent operations like the North Carolina Coast Campaign and the defense of Knoxville. However, his performance as commander of the Army of the Potomac had been disastrous, and the Battle of the Crater had ended his career on another note of failure. Historians have generally judged Burnside as a capable subordinate commander who was promoted beyond his abilities. He himself had recognized this, which made his failures all the more tragic. After the war, Burnside returned to Rhode Island and resumed his business career. He became involved in railroad management and other business ventures, this time with more success than his pre-war firearms company. He also entered politics, serving as governor of Rhode Island for 3 one-year terms from 1866 to 1869. As governor, he focused on veterans' affairs and industrial development. He was popular with voters and respected for his war service despite his military setbacks. In 1874, Burnside was elected to the United States Senate, representing Rhode Island. He served in the Senate until his death, focusing on military affairs and veterans' pensions. He was known as a genial colleague who maintained friendships across party lines. His distinctive appearance and friendly manner made him a well-known figure in Washington society. Throughout his post-war years, Burnside remained active in veterans' organizations and maintained his connection to the military community. He served as the first president of the National Rifle Association, which had been founded in 1871 to promote marksmanship training. He also remained involved with various business enterprises, serving on corporate boards and investing in new ventures. Burnside married Mary Richmond Bishop in 1852, but the marriage was unhappy and they had no children. His personal life was marked by the same mixture of success and disappointment that characterized his military career. On September 13, 1881, Ambrose Burnside died suddenly at his home in Bristol, Rhode Island. He was 57 years old. The cause of death was reported as neuralgia of the heart, what would today likely be called a heart attack. Burnside's funeral was attended by thousands, including many of his former soldiers and fellow officers. He was buried in Swan Point Cemetery in Providence, Rhode Island. In death, as in life, Burnside was remembered with a mixture of respect and regret. His legacy is complex and contradictory. He was a man of genuine personal courage and integrity who found himself in situations beyond his abilities. He was honest about his limitations, yet he accepted commands he knew he was not qualified to hold. He cared deeply about his soldiers, yet his decisions led thousands of them to their deaths at Fredericksburg and the Crater. He was loyal to the Union cause and served faithfully throughout the war, yet his service was marked by more failures than successes. Modern historians have been somewhat kinder to Burnside than his contemporaries were. They recognize that he was placed in impossible situations, particularly at Fredericksburg where political pressure forced him to attack a nearly impregnable position. They note that his subordinates at Fredericksburg failed to execute his orders properly, contributing to the disaster. They acknowledge that the Battle of the Crater was mismanaged by multiple commanders, not just Burnside. Yet even with these qualifications, the verdict on Burnside's military career remains largely negative. He was a good man and a decent general who was promoted beyond his capacity and paid the price in reputation and legacy. His name became synonymous with military incompetence, which is unfortunate given his genuine abilities at lower levels of command and his personal qualities of courage and integrity. Perhaps the most fitting assessment of Ambrose Burnside comes from his own recognition of his limitations. Unlike many failed generals who blamed others or circumstances for their defeats, Burnside accepted responsibility for his failures. After Fredericksburg, he publicly took full blame for the disaster. This honesty and humility, while admirable, could not erase the consequences of his mistakes. Burnside represents a particular type of military leader, the capable subordinate who fails when given supreme command. History is full of such figures, men who excel at executing others' plans but lack the strategic vision and judgment needed for independent command. Burnside's tragedy was that he knew this about himself but was unable to avoid the promotion that would expose his limitations to the world. In the end, Ambrose Burnside was neither a great general nor a terrible one, but rather a competent officer who was asked to do more than he was capable of doing. His legacy includes both the successful North Carolina campaign and the defense of Knoxville, as well as the disasters at Fredericksburg and the crater. He is remembered today primarily for his facial hairstyle and for his failures, which is perhaps unfair to a man who served his country faithfully in both war and peace. Burnside was even in death a man of contradictions, remembered for his distinctive appearance and his military failures rather than for his genuine service and his personal integrity.